All right, everyone, welcome. Hey, everyone. This is the game design panel for Fanfest 2017. If you haven't been to one of these before in previous years, they're basically big question and A sessions. So we can answer whatever questions you guys have. We'll do our best to answer them. We've got quite a bit of the design team, game design, UX design, content design, on Eve up on this table, so people that can answer a whole bunch of different types of questions. We'll have microphones on the sides, I believe, so people can line up and ask questions, and we'll just kind of alternate back and forth, I think. We want to start out maybe by doing some introductions?
Sure. I'm CCP Larrikin on Team Phenomenon.
I'm CCP50, CCP Fozzie, game designer on 50. Yeah.
CCP Semiotics, I'm on Psychosisters.
CCP Shark, I'm on Psychosisters as well.
CCP Surge, I'm UI designer on Team Genesis.
Yeah, I'm CCP Red Dawn, content designer on Team Genesis as well.
I'm CCP Nawal, I'm a game designer on 50.
I'm CCP Delegate Zero, I'm a designer and writer on Team Inkling.
Psychosisters.
All right, so we can basically just start getting questions from the audience. I can't actually see if anyone's lined up that one, so let's start. I see somebody at this microphone.
Okay, it's me again.
Hi.
Last year, you showed us a video about connections between serenity and tranquility. Is there any progress on that?
So, all right, yeah, the video we showed was a player-made video about some Eve players from TQ that went over and played with some players on Serenity and how they communicate with each other. That isn't really a question that we can answer. It is it's basically just a legal issue with the government of China and the way they set up their restrictions for MMOs. So unfortunately, that's not something that any of us are qualified to answer.
Okay, many thanks.
Hi, this is more like a proposal because there's been a lot of discussion about cloaking techniques and cloaking mechanics.
Sir, can you speak up a little bit?
I'll raise the mic.
Yeah,
do it even better. There's been a lot of discussion about cloaking mechanics and cloaking discussions, and I wanted to pitch an idea for the design for content that the cloaking mechanics would affiliate with local registration. So, for example, in HiSec, a person who is in HiSec just through Stargate, and the Stargate notifies and registers him in local. You jump into a wormhole, and you keep being in K-space local because there's no Stargate to identify that you left the system. And the same if you enter a K-space from wormhole. There's nothing to register you there, so you don't appear in local. But if you would be noted by a Stargate structure or NPC, you would bubble up in local. So therefore, if you have a cloaking device, you would just not appear in local at all. Therefore, you could enter with a Sino alt in nullsec, and basically covert Sino fleet of capitals in. Nobody would know that they were there unless using T-scan. So I'm wondering if that would be a viable thing to improve content for both lowsec, nullsec, and wormholes.
So anyone else have anything you want to say? I can take this.
Yeah, anyone.
The question is sort of how best to run Intel tools for who's in the system is definitely one that's come up a lot, and we definitely want to approach it. What you suggest feels really thematic, I think. It's really great that it feels very like it's got a pretty logical in-universe explanation, which is awesome. Local as it is, if we were to do things like have you stay in local and HiSec after you leave through a wormhole, because of the fact that although local was never intended as an Intel tool, it spent 14 years as an Intel tool, it would feel very much like the UI, the actual game client itself, is lying to people if they're still showing up. So we want to be careful about stuff like that. When it comes to making, like doing things like delayed local and nullsec, we think there's a lot of cool opportunities for that. We've talked before about using observatory structures to potentially interact with some of that as well. But we would want to try to find a balance between the people trying to find fights and trying to kind of have an idea of what's going on around them, and then of course the people trying to avoid being seen as well. It's, yeah, I just say going that far extreme where like you silo into a system and you don't show up in local at all, but if you jump through a gate you always show up in local, that's probably a little bit more extreme than we would be wanting to go.
The idea would be, you know, for example, there would be like a poison, you know, if a person who is registered in local, he has, well, registers everyone else who is on grid with that person. So it would have to be very coordinated attempt to sign in of a whole fleet, because if one would be registered in local, he would register everyone else in local, and therefore, you know, mess up the plan for hot dropping or counter dropping or whatever technique the people use in K-space.
Let's chat about it afterwards, man.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Yes.
Hi, this is a question I had for the last discussion, but I didn't get to ask it. What about assault frigate balance and their role in the EVE universe?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So assault frigates are definitely a ship that we want to hit with another balance pass. They're not on our short-term roadmap just because of the fact that we felt that strategic cruisers would be a more important ship to get in that time frame. So they're not in this summer time frame. But we definitely would like to make some more changes to them. As for exactly how to change them, I think it's a very interesting question because they're a ship that actually, as it is right now, is a lot more popular in total usage than a lot of people think, largely because there's many more people than you would expect that use them for running low-level missions. And that may actually be the best way to approach fixing them, is to push them more into that role and give them a more distinct PvE role, like the equivalent of Marauders, but for frigates, not necessarily the same mechanics, but the same kind of very PvE-focused role. It also might be a PvP role that would go with, but I think that's still definitely up for discussion. Okay. Anyone else have anything they wanted to say about it? Yes? Yeah. So yeah, I can't say for sure when we're going to hit them, but they definitely are
they're on our radar.
On our radar, yeah.
I used to fly a lot of assault frigates back in the day, so I feel your pain.
Thank you.
As far as the capital ship resize, especially supercarriers, any idea when that's coming down? And bumping with capital ships, it seems kind of illogical when you warp a fleet to a gate and you got like 5 faxes and they land on the gate together and 2 of them just go flying off. It seems like as a fleet, it would be some coordination with the ships to know that when they land, they'll be far enough away from each other.
Yeah, look, that's a problem, and what you mentioned second relies, like they're interdependent, so we can't really resize capitals until we look at those bumping mechanics, and that's something we don't have on our short-term roadmap, but it's something that I have a personal interest in looking at, so we'll see.
Thank you.
Interestingly, oh no, I won't say that, it's fine.
Please.
Yeah.
Yes. Hi, I want to ask a question you mentioned in last year's Vegas. So what's the process about rebalance alpha cruisers, which using by Alpha Clone? You put up 5 maybe in the Vegas last year, but you just mentioned 3 today. So I want to ask, what's the process about the rebalance?
Sorry, we only mentioned 3 of like the different cruiser types. Is that what you're?
Yeah, you mentioned 5. I check out. It's like autocannons and.
Oh, yep.
You mentioned that in Vegas, but I didn't see about the rebalance of the Alpha cruiser. So do you have any process or anything to talk about that?
We're definitely interested in doing a pass on some of the general Alpha accessible ships, destroyers, cruisers, Tech 1 frigates. Part of what we're doing with the weapon rebalance, weapon tier aside, and autocannons is partially because we see that as something that'll help out Mimitar alphas. But yeah, I think it's a good point that we could have put it up on there as something we're still interested in. As well, another thing that we mentioned at Vegas that we didn't mention this time was command ship tweaking. We've been keeping a close eye on how they've been used since the command burst, and we definitely like to do another light pass on them at some point too.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Howdy. With the capital meta modules that got released, those materials come from the NPC capital ships that appear everywhere in EVE, and that has enabled people to build those things locally without having to haul in a bunch of stuff from JITA. With the new moon mining work, is there any thought toward not having Moongoo having to still go all the way to JITA and back for T2 manufacture of multiple racial ships in whatever region you are, and allow us to build locally based on the local production of our Moongoo?
It's an excellent question. Our general goal for inter-region dependency is that we don't want any region to be fully an island and be able to operate without interacting with the others, but especially for nullsec imports and exports, the things that we push you to kind of force you to import and export, we want them to be as low volume as possible, potentially relatively high value, but relatively low volume, so that you do have to have a trade, but we kind of facilitate that trade, help you out with it. And yeah, Moongoo and the advanced composites components, the volumes of those are too high right now. So we aren't sure yet exactly which way to approach it. There's two ways that we've been thinking about of how to handle this for Tech 2. We do still want to have different moon minerals in different areas of space so that there will be that trade. But either we will allow you to compress the ore that they come from, so you can do that kind of trade, or the one I actually think is probably more likely, just reduce the volume quite a bit of the refined Moongoo. So that can be a lot easier to move around. So you can do that trade between different areas of nullsec, between like the north and the south, without it being as onerous of having to haul quite as much.
Thank you.
Hey there. Sorry. Yeah, I was wondering, just very broad question. We haven't heard much about wormhole space vision from you folks. Do you have anything you want to share about that, especially about the high-class situation, which kind of seems to be a bit stale at the minute?
So wormhole space, the key vision in a lot of ways hasn't changed in that it's it's very much the one that you guys came up with outside of CCP's original design, right? We want wormhole space to be very dangerous. We want it to be very valuable. And then kind of see what you guys do with that. But we're always looking at changing things up. I think it would be good to do another pass on the drifter boss in the high-end sites.
That's actually like a pet project of mine is the drifter boss. It uses the new AI system that we're using for the shipyards, but I want to play with its behavior a lot and have it crazy smart and actually start attacking your stuff. But we'll see what happens.
Maybe a Doomsday?
Maybe a Doomsday, we'll see.
And probably some also tweaks to the Avengers that would be good to get in there. And some of the stuff we talked about in the balance session, specifically some of the new bomb ideas that we floated, are partially intended to help shake up the wormhole meta a little bit. The focus bomb for capitals, you want to talk about?
Yeah, so there's a problem with force auxiliaries in wormhole space at the moment. It's something we're very well aware of. The focused anti-rep bomb is part of the solution to that, but that's not the entire solution. We think there's still more work to be done there, especially around cap injecting Ninazoos or Apostles or what have you. Actually, I'm going to throw something out here. A player talked to me yesterday about kind of like a rapid missile launcher style cap booster. So what happens if cap boosters were like that, had a long reload time, but you could quite quickly inject the capacitor or just use one at a time, but maybe had a 60-second reload time on them. I'm throwing a crazy idea out there. We have no plans of doing this, but I'd be interested to hear people's feedback about that. Anyway.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Hi. With the upcoming T3 cruiser rebalance, are you going to look at the skill point loss mechanic? Because like either the ship is too broken to warrant that loss, or it's like not worth it at all.
Sorry, what was the last part of the?
Like either the ship is so broken that the skill point loss like makes it worth it or it's not like broken?
Yeah, I think the skill point loss is a mechanic that provides a different type of trade-off than what we already have. So beyond dislike cost and the time it takes to skill into the ship. In the same way as it serves a similar purpose to cost in a lot of ways, in that we can't make a ship that is super overpowered and say, oh, the cost will balance it, but also cost does have an impact in how people use it. I think the skill point loss, actually, there's value there. It's something that helps differentiate the ship and give it a kind of a different type of drawback from other ships.
Okay, thank you.
We definitely can't make it a useless ship with that, or else no one will fly it, but I think there's a balance that can be found.
Hello. I was having a suggestion, but I think I'd like to ask a broader question first. What plans do you have for fleshing out more microships, fighters, drones?
Sorry, fleshing out what type of ships?
Up until now, you have all kinds of ships that do specific things good, very good, tanking, DPS, all kinds of stuff. Drone operators do most of these things, but in a more limited capacity. The question is, can you bring drones into something that only they can do? Like, say, drones that can move outside their range, but don't have any weapons, so they can scout. Or E-war drones.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting to explore. We explored kind of some of that a little bit with the fighters, obviously, in that they're a drone-like mechanic that you control in a different way. E-war drones are a kind of a separate balance problem because they exist, but they suck. And that's sort of tied into the problems of how stacking penalties work with the fact that drones are distributed rather than single modules. So we don't have a solution to that part, but we'd like to find one someday. As for like drones that can do kind of things like scouting, it definitely would be interesting. That actually probably would be something that we'd want to use the fighter system more than the drone system, but to a player, they're very similar. They're just kind of different backends. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hello. I got a question about maybe tier-siding faction models. Namely, I got an example in active armor hardener models. Let's take EM hardener. We've got basically 5 or 6 types: the Imperial Navy, Khanid, True Censure, Dark Blood, Serpentis, that have exactly the same stats. They have different market prices that fluctuate, and some of them, namely the Imperial Navy, is not used at all. Why do we have them? Are there any plans to distinguish one model from another, or maybe compact them into one model with the same stats that is dropped by different factions? Because this really messes up the fittings. You have one ship with 3 different types of hardeners, and each type of hardener has 5, 6 variations. And you have constantly to watch the market to get the best price. This is annoying.
Yep, I can see that. I can talk a little bit about the first part of that, like why don't we differentiate them more, and then CSP Delegate 0 might be a good person to talk about the second half of the question. Does that sound good? As for why, we're always looking for ways to create separate roles for each of the faction modules. You saw us do that a little bit last year with the webs and scrams. Where we actually kind of built different roles for the different faction modules and differentiate them a bit more, gave them their own kind of unique strengths and weaknesses, using range, using strength of web, using fitting, and kind of those all made for different dimensions that we could balance with. For some types of faction modules, we don't have quite as much to work with in how to differentiate them. So we'd only want to do that if there is a kind of a valuable balance purpose of it, where that choice becomes an interesting choice of which one to use. The other kind of side of that question is the in-universe sort of lore explanation of why we focus or why we have that variety. Do you want to talk anything about that?
I mean, it's in a sense it's partly a legacy issue of the design of the modules themselves, and as Fozzie was saying, the limited attributes we had to play with back in the day, and we're getting more to play with as new tech comes online. And it's also the fact that we have multiple pirate factions, we have multiple slightly sinister outlaw factions, non-empire. We have Sancho, we have Blood Raiders, and there's overlap there, or has historically been overlap. And the question is, if we have them dropping modules, if we have them dropping, if we have the modules in the loyalty point stores, how do we brand them? And it doesn't make sense to have one faction's modules in a dropping from a different faction, and that's why there is that overlap in the naming convention. The best solution would be to differentiate, I think, would be to differentiate them through what slightly different attributes on the modules so that they are actually distinct and different. But essentially it is a content legacy issue.
Yeah, I understand. But sometime before you made basically the same thing when you renamed all the meta models into compact or strained variations. So that was one thing to do. And the other way that you just mentioned is play with the numbers. Basically with these hardness you have their bonus value, CPU, PG, maybe overheating bonuses. So as far as I understand your answer, you have no current plans to integrate them or iterate them in the nearest future, yes?
Yeah, there's no current plans of merging them together.
Okay, thank you.
As we do tier aside on module groups, we're going to try to find ways to differentiate them, though.
Well, I think it's worth saying on that note that it's very important that the tier aside work that Fozzie and Larrikin announced in the balance presentation just before this one is going ahead, because once the tier aside sweep has gone across essentially all the modules, then there's a lot more freedom and design space to think, well, what can we actually do to deal with these edge cases where it's not satisfactory that this overlaps with that in that way. So I think there is movement, even if it's not on those specific modules, it's a general effort.
One other thing that, again, not saying we have plans to do this, but it's an idea that's bounced around for a long time and actually has been prototyped at CCP in previous years that might be worth at least thinking about. The idea of having some kind of set bonuses for fitting a ship with the same faction items. If you get a full Imperial Navy fit, it makes them slightly better maybe. I think that would be another interesting way to differentiate them and get some value into having those different themes, which also then feeds back into your connection with the empires, with the pirates and all that.
Hi, yes. I was talking to some best bros last night. We like that we've got incursions and we've got these new star bases, but we feel that in the 10 years of me playing, missions from mission agents haven't changed more or less in the slightest, and it would be nice perhaps to see level 4s be fun to play with friends again, say some more difference to them. They're not just the same script every time, a bit more fluid and dynamic depending on what you bring. The same thing that happens with the star bases, just to make them worth taking friends on again, because sometimes nullsec wars get a bit too much and you're busy with life and it's fun to just have an hour to do something a bit less deadly and expensive.
I agree. I think this is an area we should totally look at, and that's part of what that's part of why we built the Blood Raider shipyards. So the goal of that wasn't necessarily to build Blood Raider shipyards, it was actually to build the tools that we use to do that now we can go and use in a whole bunch of other content. We can use that in much smaller content, potentially missions in the future, and this is the sort of content that we're going to be looking at for our winter expansion.
Yeah, it is nice to see this, because for years it feels like the PvE has been underrepresented, because a lot of people do enjoy that side, and I have some friends who outright don't like to do the PvP side, they just prefer to play the game PvE, and so missions have become rather dull.
Yep.
And so I think nowadays, like, we're in the direction that we actually want to make stuff more dynamic, so you don't have to visit a web page to figure out what NPC is the next trigger for the next wave and all that stuff as well. It's definitely something to look into.
Eve survival on bookmarks, but anyway, thanks.
I'm one of those thinking low-sec pirates and very looking forward to a ship that's bonus to -10 sec status. But I'd like to hear your opinion on where low-sec is going. I haven't heard anything about that, and there's areas that would definitely need some love, whether balancing the risk-reward. I believe it's more dangerous than null right now to be doing anything in low-sec. I've killed more ventures that you can shake a stick at. And I'd like to see what you have in mind to make low-sec unique, give people excuses for them to come there and then get killed by us.
Yeah, low-sec is an area that, I mean, so when it comes to I'll just quickly pull back to the question that is common in these kind of presentations of what are we trying to do with this particular airspace or that particular airspace, we generally kind of cycle through. So if we have a release where we're doing say, a lot of wormhole stuff, then that will generally mean that there's a little bit less in some other areas. But then we'll come back to it. I know there's a lot of desire to get another rework on factional warfare at some point. I can't say for sure when we'll be able to do that. The work that's being done on PV, I know, has a lot of opportunities for low-sec as well. We're always looking for ways to kind of find new opportunities to give content to.
Well, the new moon mining could be one way.
Sorry?
The new moon mining could be one way.
Yeah, the new moon mining is going to, I think, provide a very strong incentive to find a way to get a mining op into low-sec. And I think that's a challenge that players are going to meet, because our players do anything that we consider impossible, like within a month. Except for the Palatine, that's taken you guys over a year now. But we made that one we made that one extra impossible. So it'll probably take you like 2 years. I think it'll be really interesting to see what moon mining does with low-sec, and we're really interested in talking some more with low-sec people about that. I know it's going to be a really big change, and that's going to have some downsides as well, but I think there's going to be a lot of upsides too.
Hi. You briefly talked about nullification in terms of like the T3 cruiser thing, but I would like to ask, how do you feel nullification is how do you like it for interceptors? I can think of applications where this is definitely a good thing if you're like hunting red hats or something in the gated bubble, but you kind of worked against the bubbled gates with the new bubble decay thing. What would you think of making nullification on interceptors may be an option rather than just a core mechanic? So you can choose to have a nullification on an interceptor through a module maybe, because sometimes you don't even need it or want it even. It could be beneficial to not be nullified in an interceptor.
Yep, sometimes you don't need it, but it's actually, so the idea behind the interceptor rebalance that we put in place a couple of years back now, is that interceptors, the theme that we want to pull out from what already exists with interceptors is their actual core mechanic is mobility. And with nullification being actually really the core of that. So when you don't need the nullification, you might just be better off with a firetail. So there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of value in the nullification mechanic as a way of providing an option to get around some of the very strong defenses you can have in nullsec. But then you have downsides as well when you have to be sacrificing the downsides of fitting the subsystem on the Tech 3 or the downsides of being an interceptor instead of another ship. There's definitely a lot of tweaking that can be done there, but I think it's an area where there is a good balance to be found, I think.
Thank you.
Hi. So Eve was described in many ways, but one of the ways it was, and in the past, and I think it still is trying to develop the best sci-fi simulator possible. I wanted to ask two questions. One is a yes or no question, and it's one of the ritual questions that are asked every Fanfest. But the other one that I will ask first is, are you working on, even at concept level, to increase the realism of the physicality of the space? Not the physics in general, but for example, things like making a ship that is between two ships that are shooting each other, stop the damage coming from, work as protectors or something. Or just, I don't know, for example, it would be for the Titans when they shoot the main weapon towards the target, which is usually a capital. If there is smaller ships in the wave, they just get blown away too, or things like that.
I mean, that's how some of the doomsdays on Titans work now. As to the idea of like kind of line of sight for all shots, it's nothing we're working on at the moment. It's a pretty interesting an idea and one that's been floated around before, but there's also some problems we need to look at in processing power. Like doing raycasts for every single shot would be quite a lot, and yeah.
I think for some of the ideas around it, we're always looking at exploring that kind of stuff, though. And you guys are going to be exploring some of that, I think, tomorrow. Right?
You should come to the concept art session tomorrow.
I will.
And yeah, and then that's just kind of an example of one way of exploring that. But yeah, we're always interested in trying to find more things where the environment can matter and the location of ships matter. I mean, the microjump microjump field generators were a big step forward in trying to make your positioning matter more and kind of feel like you actually have to keep that situational awareness. And I think this would be something that would help as well, yeah.
All right, and then the other question. Are you still working at any level or at any rate on opening the door?
Sorry, I didn't hear what you...
On opening the door.
Oh, opening the door.
Content partners.
None of us are.
That's fine. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Hold the door. Yeah.
I wouldn't hold this one. Nothing that I can talk about.
Hi, I'm wondering if there's any plans to rebalance the ice belts. So like right now, all the Rorquals use all the heavy water, but the ozone you can't even give away for free?
Yep, so that's something that we've looked into a bit before. Last year, we talked to the CSM about it, and then actually I just put out a little tweet asking for some feedback about the idea of, getting more heavy water into the belts. I think it was going to be swapping around a couple of the ice types in the nullsec belts. I think it's something that's definitely worth looking at some more. I didn't get a whole lot of responses back from that, but of course it's a very small sample size, one tweet. But I think it would be really good to get that up, get a little bit more heavy water, just so that it matches a bit more closely to the usage. Yeah.
Is it also possible to get ice to compress down more? Because I can fill up a Rorqual with ore in maybe 4 hours, but in 30 minutes it's full of ice. Yeah,
I mean, ice being bulky is supposed to be part of its character, I guess, in Eve. But yeah, it might be something we can look at. The volumes will potentially make some tweaks.
Thank you.
One of the core themes in a lot of the design decisions in Eve recently has been rewarding active gameplay. Has there been any thoughts on providing more active counters to AFK cloaky camping? Using, say, the observation arrays, things like that that may be coming out.
Yep, I mean, I can take that. Everyone else want to grab it? Want to give you guys a chance? Sorry?
What was the question again? I've actually
can you repeat the question?
Active counters to AFK cloaky camping, right?
Yeah, basically additional active counters to AFK cloaky camping using things like the observation arrays, stuff like that. Has there been any thoughts on that?
We throw ideas around the office quite often about that. It's something that is brought up at every single game design panel I have ever been on. We don't have any current plans, but I'm certainly not going to rule out anything in the future.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, the observatory array is a structure that is still, obviously, it's still a ways away, it's still quite nebulous, but part of that concept is to be able to tie it into all this form of intel gathering, which could include both things like local and cloaking. Yeah.
Hi. Are there any plans on missile?
Can you speak into the microphone? We can't hear you at all.
Yeah, sorry. I think you guys can hear yourselves in the microphone better than we can because of the way the speakers are set up. Yeah, so sure. In general, if you guys can speak up a little bit, that would be awesome. Thanks.
So, are there any plans on missile rebalance anytime soon?
Missile rebalance, was that?
Rebalance in missiles?
Missiles, yes. Yeah. So we talked a little bit about one set of changes we're interested in making for missiles in the presentation, the balance presentation we just had, and put it up on the forums actually on April 1st. Was not an April Fool's joke. That particular set of changes would be a nerf to rapid light missiles and a buff to heavy missiles. We're interested in potentially making more changes beyond that, and the way that we tweak the rapid light missiles is also very much up for debate. I know that's an area of heavy debate in the community. But those are kind of the two highest priority missile tasks from our perspective right now, is a little bit of a buff to heavy missiles, a little bit of a power reduction for rapid lights, and while keeping them sort of differentiated and unique. Is there any other specific, like beyond that, what are your opinions of the highest priority missile concerns you have?
Sorry, misheard.
Sorry, which type of missiles?
I mean all types.
Okay, yeah. I mean, so yeah, those are the two highest priorities right now. If you have other areas, missiles are a pretty broad topic. The more specific areas, definitely come talk to us at the round table or grab us at the pub crawl or something like that, and we'd love to talk to you about it.
I know capital missiles is something I'd like to look at. I don't think they're I don't think they're as terrible as everyone makes out. I think there's definitely uses for the Phoenix, but it is something I would like to look at.
Thanks.
So I have a question about the upwell structures and kind of the extreme ends of usage of them, because right now they fit very well in the niche of something that you're using every day and you've deployed. But if they're going to be really replacing POSes, they have to take on additional roles. So for instance, in a small POS, you can anchor that in 15 minutes and then online it in another 15 minutes, which enables a type of guerrilla warfare that you don't really get when you have to anchor a citadel and it takes 24 hours to anchor. And at the other end of the spectrum, you know, when you're in a wormhole space and you have like a proliferation of Astra houses, because it doesn't use fuel, you know, you used to be able to tell that a POS was now unoccupied because it had run out of fuel and it was just a dead stick. But now you could pretty much warp into almost any wormhole and there's at least 1 or 2 Astra houses there, and probably most of them are unoccupied. So kind of, are there plans to start going into those extremes as you're going to be taking out star bases?
So on the first one, I think it'd be interesting to explore some options around maybe a structure that doesn't allow docking, but it has some form of tethering. We'd have to be, again, very careful about the power level of it, because the ability to put it on other places than moons is a pretty strong thing. But less so in wormhole space, but more so in places with fixed stations and stargates. But I can't say for sure what we'll do in that direction for that. And then for the unused upwell structures, that's definitely something we're hearing a lot about, and we're very interested in putting some thought into it. Our highest priority when we first made citadels was making sure that these structures are easy to use, easy to get into, accessible to a wide variety of types of players. And I think we hit that goal really well, but there are some side effects of that. So that's going to be something that's going to be, we're going to have to look at over the next while. Anyone else have anything they?
Yeah, you guys got to keep breaking it some more so you can fix it.
I mean, I'm just thinking of wormhole space where over, you know, the course of many years, pretty much every moon has a dead stick at it. Mm-hmm. But when you don't have to anchor citadels at moons, how many citadels are we going to end up with in each wormhole in 3 years?
Yeah, the anchoring part is more complicated because it's kind of a like learned mechanic now, but the feedback of activity, for instance, that's something that, yes, I see it as a must-have on the continuity of the work that we have and with other functionalities. So yes, those are definitely things that we're looking at.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm curious about upwell refineries in wormhole space and moon mining potential.
Mm-hmm. So we don't have any plans, as we mentioned in the dev blog, we don't have any plans of expanding Tech 2 mineral production into areas other than low-sec and null-sec where it is right now. Primarily because we don't want to dilute the value that provides to those areas. In the same way as we aren't interested in putting the hybrid components into areas other than wormhole space because we don't want to dilute that. But we think there's a lot of potential for both high-sec and wormhole space to use this mechanic of scheduling a mining event. What form that would take, either with normal minerals or with some new resource, is very much up for discussion. And I don't think it's likely to land at the same time as the initial release of refineries, just because we already have so much to do in that time frame that this would get us probably to the point where we just wouldn't be able to polish it as well as it needs to be polished if we tried to do this in the same time frame. But I think it's really great to add this kind of gameplay with some other resources to those areas of space. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi there. What's up with, and is there any future to drifter incursions?
There's not actually any plans yet for doing other stuff with the drifter incursions, but they're always there, and we're always talking about them. As Larrikin also said, there's like stuff with probably the Hikanta coming along as well. But they've not really been used in a lot of events either and stuff like that as well. There's always like ways we can interact. Yeah, events and stuff, there's always ways we can use them, but they're always aware that the drifters are there, and they're kind of underused at the moment as well. And drifter incursions were obviously just like a small feature that went out temporarily, so they can always come back, but there's no hard plans yet on it. But yeah, definitely want to get back to it.
Hello. Hello. What's the current state of the modules for the battleships, like ECM Burst, for example, or the Target Spectrum Breaker? Are you satisfied with the place they are in right now?
Sorry, can you speak up a little bit?
Sorry. Are you satisfied with the place where the ECM Bursts and Target Spectrum Breakers are right now?
I mean, we're not, I think it's hard to say we're ever happy about a position of anything ECM related.
Yeah.
But the Target Spectrum Breakers, they're definitely a very niche module. I'm not positive that buffing them would just be a good thing for the game, though. But I do love the fact that they have this cyclical nature in nullsec where people forget they exist, and then somebody puts them on a battleship fleet, and the FC thinks that they're killing targets when they're not, and that works like once, and then it works once again in 6 months. That's kind of cool that it has that. You need to wait for everyone to forget about it. But yeah, I don't know if that's something that we're going to necessarily want to buff. They may, some of these Inferno modules may kind of be best served as a pretty niche module.
I did play with we did play with an idea of ensuring that Spectrum Target Breakers comply to all of the other E-wall things, so they would respect resistances, and if you had higher sensor strength, then your target breaking might not get broken as easily. And in fact, that was kind of part of the reason we originally didn't have ECM immunity on triage, was so that sometime in the future we could go, hey, maybe we'll allow this to work, but sometimes it will break your triage locks and whatnot. We don't have any plans to do any of this in the anytime soon, but it is something I'd like to play with sometime in the future. Just general consistency with that sort of thing.
And we have time for now 2 more questions.
So, 2-part question. Are you planning on looking at the relative performance of dreadnoughts, e.g. the Moros, in the near future, and more generally, dreadnoughts v structures? Because dreadnoughts v POSs, cakewalk, dreadnoughts v Citadels, insurance fraud.
I think the Moros is had its stay in the sun, had its like 6 years in the sun. But yeah, it's probably a little bit underpowered compared to the others. It's something I'd like to look at. Regarding the balance of...
Yeah, so of structures, structure weapons are definitely an area that we'd like to get another pass in on.
Yeah.
It's just a question of kind of finding the time. There's a couple of issues with it, and one of the big ones is the fact that the anti-capital weapons are a bit too strong, the anti-subcapital weapons are a bit too weak. We're probably not going to increase the power of the anti-subcap weapons as much as some people would like, because we don't want them to become solo polemobiles. But I do think those 2 things both need to be tweaked. We need to increase the power of the anti-subcap weapons and decrease the power of the anti-capitals. And then also one other kind of general concern that also affects this and affects the Moros more than the NAG is the fact that Citadels have such very capacitor-heavy defenses. A lot of newts, the newt bombs, and we'd like to be able to shift some of that away, keep the defenses strong, but have them rely less on newts, because that'll help not constrain your choices when you're attacking them quite as much.
That's great, thank you.
And this will be the last question.
Hi. Are there any plans to add any complexity to the economy in EVE? So I'm thinking examples like derivative contracts, so people could speculate on the price of items, or loans and things like that.
Mm-hmm. So you want some more complexity in the EVE economy. That's, yeah.
Spreadsheets?
Yeah.
You are an EVE player.
Yep. So the big challenge with with things like loans especially, but anything that would be based on a loan at its core as well, is that it's actually really hard to get the same kind of trust enforcement that you have in real life when EVE players can just biomass an alt that once it racks up a dead and then create a new one. Obviously that's not an option in real life, so that helps make the derivatives market work better in real life. I don't have a solution to that. I don't think we've ever found a good solution to that. What loans do work in EVE generally rely on incredible amounts of effort to generate that trust. because of the fact that anything that mechanically forces trust would just be exploitable with biomassing characters.
And also very un-Eve-like.
No, I mean, I think if there's a way to get a reasonable risk, that would be awesome.
Yeah, okay.
But unfortunately, we haven't found that yet. Maybe
yeah,
someday.
I mean, I was thinking things like, trading of shares and things like that potentially as well. I think there's
like an actual share market. Shares are something that they're obviously a really old mechanic in corporations. They're kind of creaky and dusty. It would be great to do a pass on them someday. I can't say for sure when we would, but that would be really cool if we ever did that.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, thanks.
How could that go?